Stress, depression, and severe mental illness can happen to anyone. Team Wellness Center has been helping those struggling with these conditions in southeastern Michigan.
They get a chance to know that somebody's on their team.
We think nobody else feels the pain that we feel. We feel like I'm the only one, but that is so untrue.
Within 24 hours of reaching out to our team, members receive psychiatric evaluations and begin the necessary treatment for recovery.
Working through my problems and seeing that I'm not the only one that has to cope has really brought me to a place where now it's okay to talk about it.
Because if you keep stuff to yourself, you can't overcome. We all need one another.
Team Wellness Center. You are not alone.
We all have our struggles and things that we've gone through in life, and we can use those things as a crutch or something that defeats us, or we can succumb to those odds and those statistics that are set before us, or we can use that as our motivation.
Welcome to My Healthy Mind. I'm Michael Hunter. All of us, every single one, has faced or will face some adversity in our lives. It's simply unavoidable. It's life. But why do some people handle adversity better than others? What do they have or know that makes navigating and dealing with life troubles easier for them? Today we'll be talking with a young couple who have both experienced some pretty serious adversity in their lives, beginning in early childhood and lasting for a number of very difficult years. Yet here they are, as you'll see, happy, successful, not only having survived their adversities, but thrived. So how did these two people deal with the hand they were dealt? Let's talk about it. Justin and Alexis Black, welcome to My Healthy Mind.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us on here.
Justin, you've been on our show before to talk about how you successfully transitioned out of foster care. And today you've brought your lovely wife with you, who also has transitioned out of foster care and gone on to do some amazing things. Can you both tell us separately about your beginnings and how you came to be in foster care in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. As an adult, when I reflect on my childhood and what I experienced and what I've gone through, I feel that a lot of what we dealt with was mental health issues not being addressed and trauma from my parents' childhood being passed down to us. And a lot of times when that trauma goes unresolved, it's passed down to your children and your children's children. So I entered the foster care system at 9 years old in Detroit, and I spent pretty much 17 or 18 years of my life in Detroit. And I entered the system with my parents dealing with substance abuse issues and a lot of domestic violence. So those are some of the things that we had to deal with throughout our childhood. And the moment specifically was when we were on the run from Child Protective Services, and we lived in an abandoned house for a few months. And as you can imagine, that wasn't the most pleasant experience, but it really got us to a point where we needed to enter the foster care system. And I lived with my brother temporarily, and then, the foster care system does what the foster care system does. You move home to home, you have those experiences, but that's basically how I entered the system.
And Alexis, how did you come into the foster care system?
Yeah, so I would say my journey kind of started when my biological mother, she died when I was 6 years old by suicide. And then I went and lived with my biological father. When around that time, the abuse started with him, where it was physical, sexual, and emotional abuse until I was about 13. Then I left his home and was taken to my aunt and uncle's house. And I had to actually testify against my father when I was a freshman in high school, and live with my aunt and uncle for about 5 years after that, until they actually kicked me out my junior year of high school. So I actually went into an actual foster home at 17, and that's when I met my foster family, who ended up adopting me actually at 26.
And when you were going through the trauma with your biological father, did anyone else know that that was happening? Did you receive any help, or were you able to cry out at all?
What actually happened was I went to my school and I told the counselor what was happening. They came to our house. It was a CPS worker came to our house, and my dad found out that I said something, even though I denied it when the CPS worker got to the house. But that night, I received one of the worst kind of beatings I've ever gotten. And he wore steel-toe boots because he worked in construction. And he kicked the wall. He meant to kick me, but I moved and it put a hole in the wall. And he left for a couple hours, probably to go to a bar or something. And he told me to clean it up. And so it was just, you could see in both of our stories, I think, a lot of failed systems, whether it was in our neighborhood, our family, or our community, to protect us.
I mean, just entering the system itself is a traumatizing experience where I entered at 9 years old and I'm confused on why can't I live with my mom. I think I dealt with a lot of pressure at that time of just wanting my parents around and not understanding why couldn't they be around. And it got to a point where I felt like maybe they didn't want to see me. And that was another layer of trauma. And so many other things compiled on top of that. I really seen myself go into a lot of depression where I became just a loner and didn't want to be around anyone. And I felt like no one understood my situation.
And while you were going through it, did either of you receive therapy of any kind or any kind of social emotional support?
Yeah, mine was actually ordered through the court. So I was kind of forced to go to therapy. And at first, I don't think I really wanted to go. But then I realized when I was living with my aunt and uncle, it was also an unhealthy situation where it was a lot of emotional and mental abuse while living with them. And so when you are taken away from an unhealthy home in foster care and you're placed with a foster family or a kinship placement, it's meant to be a healthy placement to where you can begin that healing process. But for me, it was a lot of that compounded trauma where it was another unhealthy placement. And so for me, really counseling was just a safe place where I could just be. And so I just remember many times just going and not even talking and just being there. And then I started opening up a bit more. But I did switch around to a couple of different counselors. And I think group therapy was the most helpful for me because that was the first time I met other sexual abuse survivors and other young women who were going through similar things.
And what about you, Justin?
I think my social worker at the time really wanted me to try to take advantage of that opportunity. But that was around 13 or 14 years old, and I didn't fully understand how to express myself and what I was going through at the time. The counselor that I had, he left, and I had almost a new person, what it felt like every other week, really. And as you know, you don't want to tell your story to another person over and over and over again, to where I got to a point where I gave up. Until adulthood, when I was in college, and I really was dealing with a lot of those same things. And that's when it started to click, and I started to build that relationship and feel accepted and open up about my traumatizing past.
And the last time you were with us, you talked about the Center for Urban Youth and Family Development Program. How was that instrumental at all for you?
Going through that program was a seed, which it didn't fully click at that time, but it showed me just what could I do in my life. Every single human is looking for a sense of control and a sense of autonomy. And being in the US, I think that's what a lot of people really want. But as children, I think that sense of control and autonomy is really taken away from you. You don't get to choose where you want to live physically. You don't get to choose who your parents are. You don't get to choose so many other things in your life. And all that is taken away from you. You have a social worker, you have an attorney, you may have lawyers, you have other things, other people in your life telling you where you're going to live, what you're going to do. And even with the new parents that you have, they're going to tell you what you can eat, where you go to school, and so many other things. So for people who don't understand the foster care experience, just imagine all that autonomy and control being stripped away, down to what you can eat, down to where you live, and the parents that you have. And I've had experiences, and Alexis can talk a bit about this also, where I've had experiences where I've lived in homes where people will tell you, you're eating my food, you're living in my house, and you just feel so weak and so inferior when those statements are said to you. And those are just some of the experiences of what it feels like to be in the foster care system, where you're eating someone else's food and you're living in someone else's house, and even the bed that you sleep in, you don't feel like it's yours.
Alexis, you had the similar experience, similar perspective?
Yeah, that was more or less when I lived with my aunt and uncle, and what she would kind of say to me behind closed doors when nobody was around. She would say one thing in front of other people, family, friends, but then behind closed doors with me, it was a completely different story and a lot of degrading and things like that. That's really what I went through when I lived with her. But then I had a social worker who advocated for me and said, Alexis, I have a home for you. It's a great family. They really want teenage girls. Nobody wants teenage girls, but they really felt called to do that. And I moved in with them, and I mean, they're just the greatest people I've ever met. They've completely changed my life and the way that they think, the way that they live their life, and everything that they said, they meant. It was the follow through. And as foster youth, we're always observing, I think, as like a survival technique of making sure that, are these people I can trust? Is this environment safe? And just being in their home, just constantly observing and seeing kind of how the way they live their life. And it changed my entire life. I wouldn't be who I am without them.
And you said something very interesting, Justin. You said that you didn't understand why you couldn't be with your biological parent, but you recognized that they were living in a abandoned home, that they were living in a manner that was really unsafe and unhealthy, but that longing was still there.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, that attachment to your parents will never leave, no matter the lifestyle that they live. They continue to live their life and continue to maybe abuse drugs or live the life that they wanted to. And, it didn't matter to me. I just wanted to be around them, no matter how unhealthy the situation was, no matter if we needed to go back and live in some of those rough neighborhoods and some of those rough circumstances with no heat or water or anything. I knew I just wanted to be around them regardless. And no matter how healthy my situation was with other family members or in other foster homes that I lived in, I always wanted my parents, because that void of wanting their love and wanting their approval never left, no matter their lifestyle or circumstances.
And when you became 21, you officially aged out of the foster care system, and there were some threats of how bad it could be and maybe some vision of how good it could be. So what happened right then at 21, and what was your mental health like at that time?
For me, I was in college, actually. I was at Western Michigan University, and that was a huge opportunity for me to take advantage of. I entered college at 19 years old, and aging out of the system, it was very interesting because I've been receiving so much support, and I've heard so much from my peers that, all these people like social workers and other people who are contributing to you, supporting you, that they'll just up and disappear, once you turn 21. And for so many youth, that happens. For me, I try to sustain those relationships as much as possible, and being aware of my peers' advice, I try to stay in contact with people. And not that that's on the youth themselves to try to do, but really I think it's a failure on the system, because so many youth, I believe it's around 50% of foster care youth are homeless within the first few months or years of aging out of the system. And if it wasn't for my support system, my mentors, even her adoptive parents, if it wasn't for so many loving, caring people around me, helping me trying to be successful, then I would have been one of those youth who become homeless.
And what about you, Alexis?
Yeah, I was also in college, but I was actually at the University of Michigan Flint. That's where I'm from. And I went there when I started college at 18. And then I actually, right around that time, I transferred to Western Michigan University and joined the Seed of Scholars program. And I think being in that environment of the Seed of Scholars program, which is a phenomenal program for foster youth, for foster youth and higher education, and it providing campus coaches, all those supports that you could possibly think of. They try to make it as wraparound as possible for the youth and helping you navigate college, but not just college, but the mental and emotional aspects that all come with it.
If you're having any kind of mental health crisis, we can help. At Team Wellness Crisis Centers, you'll be seen immediately, stabilized in our own private facility, and given all the care you need to get better. Don't wait. Call the Team Wellness Helpline at 1-888-813-TEAM. It could be your lifeline.
So how did you two meet? You have very similar stories. How did you find each other?
We actually met on the first day of the Seed of Scholars program. I walk in and meet him, and I actually have texts. I have texts from my adoptive mom. She met her husband, who's my dad. She met him in Henry Hall at Western Michigan University. And I texted her and I said, "You'll never guess where I'm staying. I'm staying in Henry Hall." And she's like, "You never know. You might find somebody." And I said, "No, these are all babies. These are all freshmen." And walk in, and I meet him the first day, and we just start talking throughout the week. And even though he was a freshman and I was a junior, I don't know, I think the trauma and all those things really make you grow up and mature. And even though he was a freshman, he was the most mature guy I've known, and we could have really deep, great conversations. And the first person sort of that challenged me on my faith and things like that. So it just kind of took off from there.
She gave me a lot of credit, but it took a while to get there, really.
So what did you see in Alexis when you met her?
I just saw so much in who she was, and she seemed first off out of my league, so I really wasn't trying to talk to her as much, but she seemed so much out of my league and so much ahead of the game, where she seemed so smart and brilliant. And just early on, I really admired who she was and what she represented. So once I started to get to know her more and we started to have deeper conversations and she started to reveal some of her past and some of the trauma that she's gone through, I'm just amazed, because at that time, I really dealt with not being able to reveal my trauma and being shy and being ashamed of it. It really challenged me to say, why can't I do more advocacy work? Why can't I share my story and mentor more people who've gone through what I've been through? It really challenged me to really dig deep on what I've been through and try to figure that out and try to overcome that and try to process it.
And I could tell the way you're talking, you both have a lot of admiration for each other. Mm-hmm. What is it internally that you have that helped you make it and survive the trauma, the transition, and to where you are today?
I think with both of our stories, we have incredible faith of there's better out there, there's hope that we can be better, there can be better. And even though we weren't exposed to that with anybody around us, we could see in both of our childhoods that there was something in us that we're like, we want better and we're gonna have better. And I think we had to go through individual journeys of healing and self-discovery before we could come together. Because if not, we're just gonna pour our trauma onto the other person. It's just a bomb waiting to explode, more or less, of just all this emotional baggage trying to pour onto each other. For both of us, I think since we have a similar background with a lot of trauma and things like that, we're able to admire the other person's growth and resilience and use that as sort of motivation for doing better and wanting to serve other people.
Like, what was it that said, hey, if I do this adversity won't happen again, it won't be repeated, the cycle can stop?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that starts with intentionality. Like for me, I'm aware that there's 2 generations of drug abuse on my mom's side, so that same trait could be passed down to me, and it may not be that specific drug, but it could be another drug, it could be social media, it could be food, where it's really just the void that we're trying to fill and just how we're trying to be reliant on something to give us what we need, or at least what we think we need. So I have to be aware of the things around me and make sure that my source is not, this drug or this thing or social media or food or anything else, or not even another human being. My source of happiness, my source of love doesn't come from another human being, but it comes within myself and within my spirituality. Really being intentional about where I could fall short and where my parents and my grandparents have fallen short, and trying to kind of correct those things and be intentional about doing better.
So you both were blessed. You have the internal abilities to make sure that you succeed. But what about the rest of it? What about the external, the hard work part of it? Talk to us about that.
Mm-hmm. I think for both of us, it's a lot of, working smarter, not harder, in that aspect of how do we be more efficient? How do we make sure that we're maximizing our day and what we're doing? Because we know a lot of people that have a really long to-do list and they may be working really hard, but they're not getting anything done. And so for both of us, it's really how do we make sure that we're making the impact that we want to make and we're actually serving and helping other people? And a lot of that goes through that incredible intentionality and planning and goal setting and working together on holding each other accountable, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And to add to that, it's a lot of hard work to kind of suppress your feelings and what you're going through. That takes a lot more work than it is to really understand and process your emotions and what you're going through. Like, I remember maybe the first few months where we started dating, I'm like, Alexis, why don't you be my counselor? Why do I need a counselor? You can be my counselor. But she's like, no, that's unfair. You need someone who has the unique skill set to help you, contribute to you. So we both started to seek individual counseling. And we always say you can't pour from an empty cup. And I feel that going to counseling, talking to friends, and doing certain things, whether it's prayer, meditation, working out, a lot of those things fill your cup. And seeking individual counseling started to fill my cup and help me understand my emotional needs and my mental needs, and how to be a better partner, how to be a better individual, how to be better in so many different areas of my life. And that really contributed to me and supported me. And I feel that that's really the way to work smart. So many people are obsessed with just, working hard and suppressing their feelings, or just powering through it, or I'll get over it, or I'll deal with it. But really, that's a ticking time bomb. You're gonna explode eventually if you have all this stress, all these burdens on your shoulder and on your brain. I think we can really start to work smarter and not just working harder.
And my campus coach at CETA would always say, Alexis, you gotta learn to share the burden. Because I'm always trying to figure everything out myself, and that I think was one of the most difficult things for both of us to learn, because I think as foster youth we inherently learn to be self-sufficient in that survival mode, hyper independent, figure everything out ourselves. But really, to be successful in anything, in our health, academically, in our career, whatever it is, we have to learn to be interdependent and rely on other people, because that's really what we're meant to be in that relationship aspect. And so my coach would always say, Alexis, share the burden. Stop trying to do this all yourself. And I'm like, but it's so hard. I want to do it myself. But I think, that was one of the greatest lessons I learned.
It's obvious that you've got what it takes, you've done what it takes, and you've gone on to do great things. You are happily married, you're entrepreneurs, you're mental health advocates. What's next for you?
So recently in 2020, during this pandemic, during this lockdown, we've been blessed enough to write a book. And just a quick story about that, I was studying abroad in South Africa, and Alexis came along with me to work on her business and scholarship expert. And we were emergency evacuated, where we were coming out of the country because of the pandemic. And we were coming out of the country, and we returned to the U.S., and we needed to quarantine for 2 weeks. And we lived outside of her parents' house in an RV for 2 weeks. And of course, it's a raging pandemic. The world feel like it's going to explode. Everything's going crazy. But we had to really calm down and talk about what we were going to do with our future. And applying for like 100 jobs a week would feel like. And we sat down and said, you know what? I think this is the perfect time to work on us, to produce something that's going to help people and really process what they're going through. So during that time, we really put pen to paper and started writing our book, Redefining Normal, How Two Foster Kids Beat the Odds and Discover Healing, Happiness, and Love. And during that time, we were able to write it, and we started in March of 2020 and finished it in June, but it was published on November 9th of 2020. And now we've sold over 5,500 books, and really the idea behind this book is to continue the conversation of mental and emotional health, and having individuals, families, and communities be self-reflective of the trauma that they're passing down and the culture that they're passing down. Because as you've heard, our normal has been something that's toxic throughout our lives and our childhood, and be intentional about resetting that culture and redefining your identity for a conducive future for yourself and the generations to come.
Awesome. And Alexis, what would be your final message to anyone watching this program about overcoming adversity, and perhaps in regards to aging out of foster care in particular?
Really, I would say learn to be intentional in the way that you live every single day of your life. And I think that for both of us, that's something that we've had to really learn, where the world around us has always been so chaotic and everybody making decisions for us and trying to, tell us what to do. But it's really, at the end of the day, what is it that we choose to do, and our intentionality. It is our choice and our decision of where we're going to go in life. That the decisions of our parents and others before us, they had an impact on us, but that doesn't mean that that has to sustain us going forward. That we get to decide what that is going to be for the rest of our lives. And through that incredible intentionality, it's making a plan, developing goals, surrounding yourself with positive, healthy people who are going to push you and challenge you and hold you accountable, even when you don't want them to. I call certain people where I'm like, tell me what I want to hear. But because I've been intentional in building those relationships going up to that, the people that I call are going to tell me what I need to hear and not what I want to hear. And so I think that that is going to really push us to where we need to be. And I just highly encourage other people to do that through mentorship, through your friend group, through choosing who's in your family. And I always tell people that blood just means you're related. It doesn't mean loyalty. And then I think that is so incredibly powerful that we've learned in our lives. And we choose who's in our family, and that's also in our community.
And Justin, what would be your final message to anyone who is watching today?
We all have our struggles and things that we've gone through in life, and we can use those things as a crutch or something that defeats us, or we can succumb to those odds and those statistics that are set before us, or we can use that as our motivation, as our advantage. Use that in a way that will benefit us and contribute to other people, because so many people are held down by those statistics and those ideas, and they don't want to share their talents, they don't want to share their gifts, and they don't want to share what they have inside of them. But just remember, when you hold those gifts inside of you and you don't share those talents with the world, you're robbing the world of the things that they need.
Anxiety, depression can happen to anyone for all kinds of reasons, especially during difficult and trying times that no one should have to go through alone. At Team Wellness, trained, compassionate, caring professionals will get you into the right treatment so you get better. Team Wellness. You are not alone.
At Team Wellness Primary Care Center, you will find all the basic services you need to be well and stay well. Come in for all your screenings. Come in for routine physicals and checkups. Come in for full-service dentistry. Come in for vaccinations and immunizations. At Team Wellness Primary Care Center, we take care of your total health. Team Wellness Primary Care Center. Come on in.
Thank you for watching today as we explore some of the highly attainable qualities and skills involved in dealing with whatever hand you're dealt in life and turning adversity to advantage. If you'd like to learn more about this or any mental health issue, please visit our website at myhealthymind.com, on Facebook at My Healthy Mind Show, or on Twitter. We'll see you next week for another edition of My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more content from My Healthy Mind. Let's talk about it.